Amster, and I serve as Vice President of Member Services in our parish committee. I'm glad you're here today. Thank you for coming. Welcome to First Parish. We are a welcoming, caring, and diverse faith community that seeks to nurture and inspire each person's spiritual journey while serving others in commitment to peace and justice. All right. Today I'd like to introduce Cathy Cordes. She is our guest minister today. She is the Executive Director of the UU Partner Church Council. UUPCC supports over 190 partnerships between congregations in the United States and Canada and other parts of the world. She has visited Unitarians in Transylvania, Hungary, India, and the Philippines, also Burundi and Kenya. Current UUPCC initiatives include a startup weekend for new partners, increased travel grants, expanding the use of CCB tools, and creating new ways of involving youth and young adults in international connections. Cathy is an active member of First Parish UU Church in Bedford, Mass. She served as the advisory committee for the first international convocation of UU Women and served on their executive committee. Cathy is also a former selectman in Bedford and is currently a candidate for town moderator. Oh, good luck. Her favorite role is that of grandma to Henry and Maud. She lives by the motto, the most radical thing we can do is introduce people to one another. And we will now enter into the spirit of worship together.
We are the people, writes Reverend David Bombach, whose religion is based on the practice of reason, freedom, and tolerance. Whether we're talking about Unitarians in Transylvania, India, the Philippines, England, or New England, whether we are talking about Unitarians in the 16th century or the 18th century, or now in the 21st century, that is our distinguishing mark, the style of our religious life. A fierce and abiding commitment to reason, to freedom, and to tolerance. And that religious style, which is our hallmark, was created and crafted in Transylvania over 4 centuries ago. It is still cherished there by people who have suffered for their faith more than we can imagine. Someone needs to witness their struggle and care about its outcome. If not we who have inherited their religious method, then who? And if not now, then when? Please join me in our first hymn this morning, number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me. Before the children leave, I'm going to tell a very quick story about Roy. Roy is the invention of Gary Larson, the cartoonist who drew The Far Side. So Roy is just an average person, and he's out for a stroll, and he's in the middle of a field, there's no one else around, and all of a sudden there are these spacecraft, lots of them, and one of them lands. And Roy is surprised and so excited, and the door opens, and out walks 3 aliens. And they're kind of weird looking, because in place of where our heads are, they had something that looked like a hand with fingers at the top of it that wave like this. But they seemed kind of friendly, so Roy decides, I'm going to assume they're friendly. And so what do you think he does? He runs over and he grabs the hand and shakes vigorously in an attempt to be very, very friendly. Well, what do you think happened? Roy hurt the leader. Actually, Gary Larson says he annihilates because of this, the world gets annihilated, but I changed the story a little bit, and I said the aliens ran back to their ship and they left and they never returned. But did Roy mean to hurt the aliens? I don't think so. And do you think that the alien knew that Roy wasn't trying to hurt them? Maybe not. What do you think Roy might have done differently? Sorry, say it out loud. How? Yeah, put your hand up and like our ancestors greeted the Native Americans before they annihilated. Open hands. Right, open hands are a little more friendly. Well, especially when it's somebody who's new and you meet them for the first time and maybe they don't look like you. Maybe what you want to do is you want to step back and you want to be friendly and open, but maybe you just want to talk with them and use your words. And maybe what you want to do is listen to them and ask them questions, because it takes time to learn the customs of some other alien group. Let's sing the children out on their way. First reading today is from Pico Ayer. He's a travel writer and a poet. He writes about travel. We travel initially to lose ourselves, and we travel next to find ourselves. We travel to open our hearts and our eyes and learn more about the world than our newspapers will accommodate. We travel to bring what little we can in our ignorance and our knowledge to those parts of the globe whose riches are differently dispersed. And we travel, in essence, to become young fools again, to slow time down, to get taken in, and to fall in love once more. For if every true love affair can feel like a journey to a foreign country, where you can't quite speak the language and you don't know where you're going, and you're pulled ever deeper into an inviting darkness, every trip to a foreign country can be a love affair, where you are left puzzling over who you are and whom you've fallen in love with. All good trips are like love, about being carried out of yourself and deposited in the midst of terror and wonder. And one more reading. Service is not the same as helping. Helping is based on inequality. It's not a relationship between equals. When you help, you use your own strength to help someone else with less strength. It's a one-up, one-down relationship, and people feel this inequality. When we help, we may inadvertently take away more than we give, diminishing the person's sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Service is also different from fixing. We fix broken pipes. We don't fix people. When I set about fixing another person, it's because I see them as broken. Fixing is a form of judgment that separates us from one another. It creates a distance. So fundamentally, helping, fixing, and serving are different ways of seeing life. Serving is different to fixing. When you help, you see life as weak. When you fix, you see life as broken. And when you serve, you see life as whole. Fixing and helping may be the work of the ego, and service is the work of the soul. When we serve in this way, we understand that this person's suffering is also my suffering, and that their joy is also my joy. We may help or fix many things in our lives, but when we serve, we are always in the service of wholeness. I'd like to introduce the offering. You say the little efforts I make will do no good. They never will prevail to tip the hovering scale of justice which hangs in the balance. I don't think I ever thought they would, but I am prejudiced beyond debate in favor of my right to choose which side shall feel the stubborn ounces of my weight. Our offering will now be received.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
I gave him cakes and I gave him ale and I gave him sack and cherry. I kissed him once and I kissed him twice, and we were wondrous merry.
I gave her beads and bracelets fine, and I gave her gold down dairy. I thought she was afeard till she tickled my beard, and we were wondrous merry. Merry we were, wondrous merry, 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 my hey down dairy. I kissed her once and I kissed her twice, and we were wondrous merry. I gave her peace and I gave her fine, and I gave her gold down cherry. I thought she was afeard till she tickled my beard, and we were wondrous merry. I gave her peace and I gave her fine, and I gave her gold down cherry. I kissed her once and I kissed her twice, and we were wondrous merry.
was delightful. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. My long-distance love story began in 1995. Our church hosted the Unitarian minister, his wife, and 2 children, and a translator from our partner church in Abaș-Falva, Transylvania, in Romania. In preparation, the call went out for people to volunteer to host them. I volunteered. They were here for almost 2 weeks. During that time, we had 5 potlucks at church, just so everyone could be sure to meet them. They were charming and wide-eyed, curious at our houses and our cars and our grocery stores and our churches, and I know they were more than a little cultural shocked. We had fun and we laughed almost endlessly as we conversed in sign language, stumbling to find words in dictionaries. We taught each other new vocabulary. The children learned much faster than the adults, of course, and time passed so quickly. Edith, the minister's wife, and I were now best friends. The night before they left, she and I stood on the porch together and looked at the moon. Bedford's moon, I said, as I pointed to the moon. Abaș-Falva's moon, she said, and she pointed to the moon. Then in pantomime and with a few words, we both understood that when she was in Abaș-Falva and I was in Bedford, we would both look at the moon and think of each other. And she made me promise to come and see her. We were both sobbing the next day as they left. I could hardly wait to see her again. Letters written took forever to arrive. This was 1995. There was no internet, no email. Some letters never got there. We had made friends with a new Hungarian-American family that started coming to our church because of the partnership. So we had found a translator. My husband Ron and I, along with this family, made plans to go the next summer. It was an amazing experience that literally changed my life. I was smitten, and so was Ron. I knew how much I already loved the people. I had no idea how beautiful Transylvania would be. The rolling hills and picturesque villages, right out of some fairy tale. On the trip, we had 2 Unitarian Transylvanian ministers for guides and our friends who spoke Hungarian. We learned so much Unitarian history. We held in our hands the communion cup used by David Ferenc, the man who established the Unitarian faith in Transylvania over 400 years ago. And of course, we spent 5 days in our partner village, and we got to meet everyone who lives there. Did I mention it's a very small village? The whole trip was magical, and my life was now changed forever. The minister of my church was on the board of directors for the Partner Church Council, UUPCC. More about the organization in a minute, but when I returned, he encouraged me to get involved. I could not wait to volunteer. For more than 25 years, people from churches all over the United States have been creating their own stories of partnership. Stories that come from the connections with Unitarians and UUs, not just in Transylvania, but other European countries, now also in India and in the Philippines, with small Unitarian churches in England and Wales. And soon we will be able to partner with congregations being formed in African and South American countries. The UU global community is a reality, and it is growing all the time. Connecting to international UUs was once the privilege of UUA presidents and the UUA staff in Boston. It took place mainly at gatherings of organizations like the International Association for Religious Freedom or Religions for Peace. But in 1990, something else happened. In 1990, when the communist government fell and the Iron Curtain that had isolated our fellow Unitarians for over 40 years finally collapsed, connections were made again between the UUA and the Transylvanian Unitarian Church. Then UUA President Bill Schultz met with the bishop and asked what we could do. Other church denominations from Europe and elsewhere were pouring into Transylvania, and Romania, the bishop asked Schultz to start a sister church program. We want to know that we Unitarians are not alone. The UUA did. A letter inviting churches to apply for partnership went out, and over 100 churches answered the call. We have about 1,000, so that's a pretty good number. They were not going to be minister-to-minister relationships, however, but rather congregation to congregation. And what happened next was amazing. American UUs, congregants, choirs, youth, ministers, everyone and anyone, in small groups at first, started traveling to visit their partners. And friendship stories like the one I have with Edith were repeated around the country. In 1993, the UU Partner Church Council was formed by these churches that were now in partnerships to connect with each other, to support the fledgling connections, to share best practices, and to invite other churches to become partners as well. The organization's mission statement reads, in part, the mission of the UUPCC is to foster and support partner relationships between UU congregations and individuals in the United States and Canada, with Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists in all other countries where partnering is sought and welcomed. These will be mutually beneficial, responsibly sustained, and linked by joint and mutual covenants. This is the organization that I volunteered with in 1996 after returning from Transylvania on my first trip. I was elected to the board in 1998, and when they decided to hire their first executive director in 2001, I knew I wanted to do it. I resigned from the board and I applied, and I have been in this position ever since. But from the beginning, everyone agreed the partnerships should be mutually beneficial. But this goal proved harder to do than expected. Like Roy from the story this morning, we had great intentions, but we didn't always pause to listen and learn. We made assumptions and we acted in ways that we were sure would help. We wanted so much to be generous, and we were. But the impact was not always what we were trying for. Their buildings were in disrepair, their schools and their churches and their parsonages, some of which were 300 to 400 years old. All of the buildings had been confiscated by the communist government and were then neglected. Partners sent thousands of dollars to repair and improve Unitarian buildings once ownership was returned to the Unitarian Church. And it was a good thing, and it was a helpful thing. Many of these buildings date from the 14th century when they were originally built as Catholic churches. And they have been beautifully restored. Parsonages that were hardly livable for the ministers and their families now could have indoor plumbing and running water. The results were good, but we had created a very unequal relationship that left the Transylvanians feeling like the poor cousins sometimes. When we visited, we saw beautiful rolling fertile hills and villages preserved in time. It was like stepping back 150 years. Houses were heated, and cooking was done on wood stoves. Water came from a well in the yard. Indoor plumbing was rare in the villages. Many of our partners were subsistence farmers, and farming was done by hand with little or no machinery. It was quaint and peaceful in the villages, and we were welcomed by some of the most generous and hospitable people. It looked very familiar, albeit old-fashioned. We assumed that it was like America 150 years ago. We wanted to help. One U.S. partner church decided that having a tractor would be a really helpful thing to do, so they bought one for their partner church. Other churches heard about this great idea and followed. Tractors started appearing in many villages. The intention was good, the impact was not so good. I wonder if you can imagine why. This is a country that had just escaped from 40 plus years of an oppressive communist dictatorship. No one wanted to think about communal ownership. They had abandoned the buildings and the equipment of the local communist barns. These people had survived a regime that relied on informants. It was hard to trust any of your neighbors. People were granted favors when they informed on each other to the government. Individuals had narrowed their focus, so they were only feeding their own families. If they thought of community at all, it was when they went to church on Sunday. And going to church on Sunday was not such a great thing to do either. So what did we expect? Who was going to own the tractor? Who would manage it? Who would decide which fields got plowed first? It turned out to be an insurmountable challenge in most of the villages, and the tractors were soon sold, and the money was used for the church. Contrast this story with another that was being written in a different partnership. The Fairfax, Virginia UU congregation had also visited with their whole choir on one trip, several youth trips, and other follow-up visits. Deep friendships were formed and lives were intertwined. The minister and his wife visited Virginia. Fairfax did something a little different. Instead of making assumptions about what would be beneficial, they asked their partners what they needed. And lo and behold, the partner had an answer. We want a medical clinic. They had seen one built in another community. Getting medical care was really hard. You had to travel a long distance. The Swiss partners for the Reformed Church had helped another community, and they knew that it was successful there. So the Transylvanian minister led the effort. He organized a meeting with the minister of the Reformed Church that was also in this village, and they had a partner in Switzerland. Soon there was a meeting with all four partners, the U.S., the two Transylvanian churches, and the Swiss. Plans were made. Everyone had a role to play. The villagers would contribute the labor. Most of the money came from the Swiss and U.S. partners. Some of the labor also came from the U.S. and Swiss partners when they went to visit. The clinic was built, and once the building was finished, the government supplied the clinic and sent a doctor once a week and a nurse twice a week. The contrast in outcomes between these and other projects made us step back and begin to look at the dependency or charity model that we had promoted without thinking. Our awakening came also from the gentle questions we heard more and more frequently from our partners. We understand what we get from this relationship, but what do you Americans get from this? Why do you come year after year after year? Did we really want the value of these partnerships to be measured in dollars and cents? So UUPCC asked U.S. partners to answer the questions of what we receive from partnership. And I'm going to share some of these answers with you. Partnership gives us a sense of joy, experiences of love and fun, and gets us outside of ourselves. Partnership connects us with Unitarian history that broadens our perspective about our faith and deepens our understanding of our faith and our power. We learn that the values of the UU faith provide comfort and strength to financially poor, often uneducated farmers and everyday workers in all corners of the globe, not just middle class, well-educated North Americans. We experienced radical hospitality. As one person said, when you're served one of a family's 3 chickens, you begin to understand the true meaning of hospitality and generosity. Being of service to each other teaches us how to work with others, another says, even if there's a language barrier. It provides a laboratory where we can become more competent in a multicultural world. Partnership confronts us with our privilege. Partnership challenges us theologically and provides a framework for reflecting on our own beliefs. One minister told this story. Our Transylvanian partner minister was driving us in the mountains. We were talking about theology. Suddenly, he slammed on the brakes and he said, "So, you're not all Christians, are you?" He had studied in the United States for a year, but had not really fully realized that fact until that moment. We answered affirmatively, and then he said, well, that's okay. And he drove on. The minister goes on to say that similarly, we are realizing the depths of Christian identity for our Transylvanian partners, and it has been an important learning. It has helped us understand not only the Christian roots of our faith, but also has helped the non-Christians among us welcome and engage with the Christian Unitarian Universalists in our own congregations. And finally, these partnerships link us together in a worldwide community of Unitarian and Universalist. In 2001, 2002, UUPCC started celebrating these benefits and rewarding them, publishing it in our newsletter and letting it be known that we get so much out of these partnerships. We also began conducting a 2-year study of the impact of economic assistance in partnership. At the end of that study, we published fairness and awareness guidelines that made recommendations about the role of money in partnership and offered best practice examples such as the Fairfax example. But about the same time, the UUPCC was also fortunate to be introduced to Professor Richard Ford from Clark University. Dick's career spanned 40 years developing and teaching a participatory planning process. He worked in Africa and Indian communities, Asian communities around the world, refining the tools and techniques that allowed those communities to identify their own strengths and weaknesses, prioritize their own needs, develop consensus, and design action plans to address those needs. The fit was obvious and immediate. Here was a way that our partners could be the support system and let the communities themselves take the lead in addressing their need. UUPCC has incorporated this methodology and philosophy into the vision of mutuality of partnership. Yes, money still plays a role in partnership, and that is right. We are blessed with a higher standard of living than some of our partners. And where that is the case, we naturally want to share. So we learn to let our partners take the lead, and we listen, and we wait, and we support. And we find ways to be of service to each other, and we celebrate the mutual benefits of the partnerships. 25 years later, life has changed for our Transylvanian partners. The economy has shifted. They have joined the EU. They have big box stores, and they have consumer products. I don't know if that's a blessing or not, but we have come full circle. Just a few years ago, the Concord, Massachusetts church, Concord, Massachusetts, had undertaken a huge renovation project. The pledge came in, but the budget came in higher than the pledges. So they were conducting another pledge drive to kind of cover the last few thousands of expenses. Their partners in Transylvania sent a contribution to the project. Can you imagine Concord's surprise when they learned that the gift that was sent was $10,000? What began as partnerships with Transylvania has now spread to other countries, each with their own stories of connection and community. The UUPCC supports about 190 partnerships now, and our latest ones are England and Wales. We're talking to small congregations throughout Europe, and there are new ones emerging in South America, in Mexico, and in African countries. The love stories continue. Edith and I are both grandmothers now. We have shared the death of our parents, the graduations and weddings of our children, and the births and lives of our grandchildren. Our relationship has grown strong over the years. I've learned Kicsi Magyar, and she has learned a whole lot of English. We now talk frequently on Skype, and Google Translate helps when our language limits are reached. And we love each other as much as we love our own sisters. So my question for you today is, how might an international partnership fit the fabric of your church? Are you ready for the opportunities to move out beyond borders, to open yourselves to the friendship, and to practice new skills in multicultural living? UUPCC has at least 12 churches in 4 countries currently looking for partners. Is one of them just right for you? We invite you to think about starting your own stories. Would you join us now in singing hymn number 159, This Is My Song? Where there is faith, there is love. Hol hit ot seritet. Where there is love, there is peace. Hol seritet ot beke. Where there is peace, there is blessing. Hol beke ot aldash. Where there is blessing, there is God. Hol aldash ot ishten. Where there is God, there is no need. Hol ishten ot sucheg ninshen.